Welcome to The Voice of Retail. I'm your host, Michael LeBlanc. This podcast is brought to you in conjunction with Retail Council of Canada, and this episode is brought to you by Fortinet. Fortinet secures the largest enterprise service provider and government organizations around the world. Fortinet empowers its customers with intelligent, seamless protection across the expanding attack surface and the power to take on ever-increasing performance requirements of the borderless network, today and into the future. Fortinet's mission is to secure people, devices, and data everywhere. Cyber attacks on businesses are more commonplace than we might think, and the pandemic might have made it worse. As offices transition to work-from-home systems and many retailers either started or expanded their e-commerce practices, the Chief Information Security Officer for National Retail at Fortinet says that protecting your cybersecurity perimeter has never been so important and complex. In this episode of The Voice of Retail, I sit down with Courtney Radke, Fortinet's National Retail CISO, to talk about how retailers can better protect themselves and their customers in a rapidly challenging digital landscape.
So I think a first start is do more than just the basics when it comes to protecting endpoints.
Let's listen in now. Courtney, welcome to the Voice of Retail podcast. How are you doing this morning?
I'm doing well. How about you?
I'm doing fantastic, thank you. And we were just talking about smokers and barbecues and family and stuff just off mic, so it's great to chit and chat. But let's get right into it. Let's share with the listeners, the folks out there, a little bit about yourself, your background, and your role at Fortinet.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I came into the industry from retail. I was in the restaurant industry. Started off, as a network technician, to an engineer, to an architect, and then ultimately leading, full retail network architecture, cybersecurity for some very large QSRs in North America. At Fortinet, now my role as field CISO for retail and hospitality encompasses many things, but ultimately I'm responsible for our technology development, go-to-market strategy, and working with retailers, service providers, and our industry partners to really understand the challenges and educate on the trends and overall threat landscape.
All right. And so the listeners don't miss it. You said you're CISO, so that's Chief Information Security Officer, right?
Yes, absolutely, for our retail vertical.
And now, how did you, when you started, you described your kind of career trajectory or progression. Did you always want to get into the security side, or was that a natural progression of just, a natural demand or opportunity? How did that come about?
Yeah, I think it was just an organic progression. I kind of had a, network architecture and security background, so it was just kind of a natural fit.
Yeah. So for you, you got to build it and do the architecture, so you could spot the challenges or conversely see the threats, right? Just from the ground up. It's a great background. Now, talk about Fortinet. Tell us all about them, your company scope of work, where you operate, retail background focus, that sort of thing.
So Fortinet is a 20-year-old company, founded in 2000. We're headquartered in Sunnyvale, California, and most of our R&D takes place in North America, though we are a broad global company. We have a broad footprint. So 8,600 employees, 59,000 partners, and over 500,000 customers worldwide. And my role focuses mainly on the retail vertical for North America and globally. But Fortinet really solves challenges for businesses of all types, of all sizes, across all verticals.
Now, did you say 500,000 customers? Did I hear that right?
Absolutely. Mm-hmm.
So obviously not just big, but medium-sized enterprise. Give me an idea of the scope of the minimum size viable customer that you two would get on well, and talk a bit about that.
Yeah, any company that needs security, any company that's moving forward with digital innovation, which can start at a one store location, it can go all the way up to tens of thousands of sites. So really, Fortinet is tailor made for businesses of all sizes, of all complexities.
Well, we'll get into that and how that works, but let's talk about the threats to business. Now, is it my imagination, or is it just a natural progression that there seems to be more risk today than there was in the before time, pre-pandemic? Is that real or is that just mostly in my mind? I mean, I can think of a lot more people working at home, for example. That's different than in the before time. But is it just more obvious to me, or has the threat landscape, as you would describe it, has that gotten worse or increased over the past 18 months or 2 years?
Yeah, I think it's a bit of both. It's definitely not in your mind. There was a record number of breaches and incidents reported over the last year. I mean, they're way up. The attacks they're occurring. They're bigger in scale, but they're definitely bigger in publicity. That's a lot of things have brought cybersecurity issues to the forefront, to the spotlight, which can be a good thing. It brings attention to real world problems, of the issues that are faced by these businesses every day. Hopefully, creating a call to action. On the flip side, cyber criminals want publicity. It continues to be lucrative. It is a business after all. So the increased exposure, acts as free publicity for them as well. So you're not crazy. I mean, it is big. There's more happening. And I think we're also getting bigger publicity on it.
So let me follow that thread for a bit, because I was about to say, sunlight is a disinfectant. In other words, there's more publicity, more profile. But what you're seem to saying is that actually helps the bad guys. Talk about that a bit.
Yeah, it's a little bit. You're not wanting to be on everybody's radar, but as I said, it is a business. These are, they're doing ransomware as a service. They're trying to recruit people into these organizations. So the more publicity, the more money that they say that they make is going to recruit more people.
So I guess they're not taking ads out on LinkedIn. This is their best way to recruit.
Honestly, sometimes they do. Sometimes there's open calls for recruitment into these organizations.
Wow, black hats wanted, I guess, or
absolutely
whatever you would say. Is it the case that more companies are now? I know it is the case in Canada, soon to be the case that you need to declare breaches. I heard someone once said that, there's two types of companies, folks who've been breached and folks that don't know they've been breached or haven't told anybody. Is it the case that more people are declaring breaches earlier? And again, I'm kind of circling around the same question. I guess I'm asking it a couple of different times. Is there more activity, or just we know more about that activity?
Yeah, we know more. We know more about the activity, and I think the businesses want to get ahead of it. And so there's no clear set guideline of when to declare. There's a lot of times where law enforcement will tell you not to declare yet because they're still trying to gather information. So some of these breaches only come to light months or years after they actually happen, and a lot of times they don't know about them. It's not just that they're not declaring; it's they don't know anything happened.
Well, there's a big breach in the U.S., right, that went on for many, many months before, in the government, I believe, many months before it was discovered. So that's not uncommon, right? Sometimes it's not obvious that you've been breached. Is that the case?
Yeah, I think, what we're seeing is the sprawling nature of these disparate networks. It becomes much harder to determine, did something happen? Where did it happen? When? And how far did it go?
Is it the case that when COVID hit, suddenly millions of employees went home, and did that increase the risk, or is that kind of a net neutral to positive or neutral to negative impact on the threat profile?
Yeah, I think by now many organizations have had a chance to rethink what the idea of a work from home means. They've been able to put in additional protections, change their baselines, provide training for the remote workforce. Yeah. But for a time, it was a disruptor. Work from home created yet another edge that needed to be protected on top of the branch, data center, cloud, everything else. Right. And it just made the perimeter even harder to define than it ever had been before. The problem being there was this initial scramble to bring functions online. We had to be operational. So many organizations just threw things at the wall and see what sticks. A lot of point products, little integration, left a lot of gaps in security controls.
I guess the only thing it solved is the old, don't pick up a USB in the parking lot problem that that you would kind of hear, right? So I guess it solved that problem. It dispersed audience. Now, as you think about these risks, what are the top concerns you're protecting against today? You mentioned ransomware. What are you hearing from retailers in terms of what they're most concerned about? We've seen in the past, for example, breaches from companies that have been acquired, weak points in point of sale and store. I don't hear too much about that these days, but what are the top couple of ones that you guys are really, I think really focused on?
I think, POS is still a top concern for different reasons now. But I think cloud is that number one. It's taken the number one spot. Web applications.
Wow, really?
Yeah. They're the number one target because that's where the data is. Hopefully by now, there's not credit card data or sensitive information going through POS systems. And so they're still being used as a stepping off point. They're still being used as a point of ransomware. There's still, disruptions for business, at business operations. If I can't use my POS, I can't sell X.
Right. So they'll shut it down versus they'll shut you down versus get in there. Because, a lot of the cloud providers, they're pretty big organizations, right? Are we safer with cloud-based computing or not? I mean, is that a $1 billion question, or is that
a question? I mean, you can be just as safe either way. I think right now what we have is this still a lack of understanding in this cloud responsibility model. Who's responsible for what in the event of an incident? Who's responsible? Who's accountable? Who's actually putting in the security controls? So I think we're still in this area where, especially now, a lot of companies had to rapidly expand into cloud. They are maybe adopting cloud for the first time, as crazy as it seems, and there's still not a full understanding of that cloud responsibility model. So it can be safe. It can be just as safe. Moving to the cloud isn't inherently dangerous. It just has to be done correctly.
Interesting. Now, what's the right balance for retailers in terms of investment in network and protection services? I mean, when you start projects in retail, sometimes you try not to design to the worst case scenario. You try to design to the most likely scenario. What's that balance that you advise the clients on in terms of, investment in security versus too much focus on security? Or is there such a thing as too much focus
that's also,
on security?
That's also a tough one. I think, for me, our mindset is security and networking, they have to go hand in hand. What we talk about it is the convergence of network and security. And that's kind of the critical piece to keep up with the speed of digital transformation. But also businesses can't afford a security incident that erodes customer trust and brand loyalty. That's honestly the industry best practice formula that I see going forward is the convergence of network and security, investing in solutions where, security isn't that bolt on or you have to think about it afterwards. If you have to think about it, do I have enough security put in here? Obviously, there's platinum plating we don't want to get to, but security should always be a cornerstone. And I think that's kind of the right balance. I'm not saying 50% of your spend has to be on security and 50% on networking, but make sure that they're, converged.
I was going to say, is there some kind of formula that if I spend $1 on technical infrastructure and is there a percentage formula, or is that simplifying it too much?
I think that's probably an oversimplification because every business is different. It depends on the industry that you're in. It depends on your risk profile. Depends on if you've been attacked before, and if your retail is always a prime target for attack, but some organizations more than others are. So there's not a silver bullet of I spend this much and then I'm secure. Interesting.
So when I think of this ransomware, I think of the payment type. Is the problem here cyber currencies? I mean, the Bitcoins of the world seem to be the way the black hats get paid. Is this the biggest weakness here? Is digital currencies? Is that just the currency of crime now? Is this a problem that, this isn't a political podcast, but as banks and central bankers turn their mind to, non-fiat currencies, as they would be known, it seems to me that the weakness of these currencies, amongst the craziness of the up and down that I don't get based on tweets and appearances on Saturday Night Live, is that it's really the currency of crime in your world, isn't it?
I haven't seen Dogecoin yet be the currency of crime, but I mean, it does get a bad stigma. I mean, it's not what it's used for that. We often see it, attributed to cybercrime, but there's so many other things that it can be used for. I think if it wasn't around, they'd find another way. It's here. It's been easy for them to use. We're seeing a lot of crackdown. We're seeing a lot of regulation on it. I think we got to get a handle on it. The way to stop cybercrime is to, same as always, hit them where it hurts, and that's in the purse strings. And so I think it gets a negative connotation because that's what it's been used for. But if it wasn't around, they'd find another way.
Yeah, I mean, we're a long way from black satchels of cash and bus station lockers, though, right? With cyber currency, I mean, it's hard to track. Anyway, again, not really the focus, but I was just kind of curious. Since I got you on the mic, it was just occurred to me to kind of ask you that question. So where do you guys fit in all this? Like, I'm a retailer. Lots of retailers listening to the podcast, and some who are probably saying, are we secure enough? Or some saying, listen, we moved to cloud. Sounds like, are you consulting? Are you technology? Are you come in and say, here's some solutions that come on and sit on top of services? Just unpack that a little for me?
Yes. So
yes,
we're a security company. We're an engineering company first. We're enabling rapid digital innovation, and we're doing that through guidance and direction. Consulting. We're doing that by providing the technology. We're doing that by influencing organizations to set standards and guidelines. So it's kind of all of the above. Fortinet often got known as the firewall company for good reason. But there's so many other solutions out there. A broad portfolio, and that's from home to branch to data center to cloud to mobile to really everywhere business is. That we provide solutions for that and guidance, direction, and obviously the technology, the backbone that it runs on.
What I find interesting is it sounds like you've got a solution. I don't want to call it a la carte by any means, but if you're talking about single store to a dozen stores, SMEs to big enterprises, it sounds like you've got something for everyone. I mean, you obviously, you're not going to roll out an account executive, I wouldn't think, to a single store. So you must have some, so to speak, off the shelf kind of products. Is that how you're designed?
Well, I mean, so we have a lot of the biggest thing with us is it's organically grown, and it's all built around this concept of FortiOS. And so whether it's the smallest firewall that we have all the way up to our carrier class, it's the same OS, and we build around that same platform, and it's all with that integration, automation, and the broad portfolio in mind. And so as you said, we're not going to roll out an account executive to a one store site, but the beauty of it is if you have one store, you have an entire data center, you're kind of getting that same research and development going into both of them. You're not getting a smaller functionality box, maybe speeds and feeds, but it's the same throughout the entire portfolio.
Talk about your business model. Is it a pay-as-you-go? Is it a SaaS model? Again, the answer might be yes to all.
You guessed it, right? It's whatever. Business is agile now, and we need to be able to support that fluidity which business moves. And so whether you're still in data center, you have a hybrid approach, you're fully in the cloud, you don't want to own any hardware infrastructure, our solution really tailors towards that. So obviously we have hardware, which what sets us apart is we have dedicated ASICs inside that hardware for really really high acceleration. But if you need more flexibility, we have virtual, we have pay as you go, we have SaaS based models, we fully host models. So we've had to adapt and provide our solutions wherever business is, and that again, another thing that kind of makes us unique.
I want to get back to some of the challenges that retailers are facing. Should we be concerned that nation-state actors seem to be having a hand in some of this? I mean, it's not unusual, I guess. There was industrial espionage, as it was known, where certain nations would try to gain competitive intelligence on industries. Is it? I think they're less likely as nation-states to try to disrupt your business and more likely to kind of steal from it. Is that what we're seeing today, or is it a mix of state-sponsored individuals? I mean, we were talking earlier in the podcast about is it just a pure profit model? So is it a mix of both? Is it something that's on your radar screen? How do you process that?
It's on the radar. I mean, the attacks in retail, by and large, are financially driven, and so they're after the money, or more acutely, they're after the data. That is where the money is, and so there's a threat of business disruption, brand harm, et cetera, via ransomware because it's continuously lucrative, as we just said. That's not to say that nation state and nation actors aren't something to be aware of. We're definitely aware of them. We've seen a sharp increase in nation state attacks on businesses in technology, healthcare, pharmaceuticals as of late, but not necessarily a specific target to retail as much. But that doesn't mean that organizations aren't also collateral damage. When a nation state attack occurs, aimed at a widely used software or supply chain attacks, they often become downstream unfortunate targets of those nation state attacks.
From the team that has taken thought leadership and community for retail marketers and direct-to-consumer brands to the next level with their Commerce Next conference series, get ready for Season 1 of the Conversations with Commerce Next podcast. Hosted by veteran retail e-commerce marketer and podcaster Michael LeBlanc, with co-hosts Veronica Sansev and Scott Silverman, and presented by Wonderkin, Conversations with Commerce Next gives voice to the e-commerce and digital marketing community like never before. You'll hear thought leadership with one-to-one interviews that will dive deep into marketing challenges, winning digital strategies, the latest research, technologies, and people behind one of the most dynamic industries in the world. Together we'll work to make sure as we emerge from the COVID era that you're ready to take on the new challenges and opportunities and help you thrive with insights and advice from industry leaders who have hands-on experience that you need to hear. Available on Apple, Spotify, Amazon Music, all the major platforms where you enjoy your podcast today, with new episodes debuting every 2 weeks. All right, so lots of retailers listening. Advice to retailers who are thinking about their state of security and they're interested to hear more. Frame it for me in 2 starts and 1 stop. 2 things they should be doing today. Maybe they already are, but from your experience and day-to-day talking at the C-suite. And then 1 thing they should probably do less of or stop doing that maybe was a very good best practice 18 months ago, but is less so now. What's your advice?
So I think a first start is do more than just the basics when it comes to protecting endpoints. We've seen time and time again that the endpoints are extremely vulnerable to targets of ransomware. What we've really seen is EDR should become more commonplace, more common practice to keep up with today's advanced threats. Mm-hmm. I think we can't expect the legacy endpoint protections to protect organizations from the advanced threats that are out there. They're getting smarter. They're using the same technology. We need to be smarter and protect against it. And I think another start would be adopting a zero trust methodology. That's a way better way to protect the ever-growing and hard to identify network edges in these distributed environments. And now doing so is, less cumbersome. It's more approachable concept than ever before, and can be done.
Unpack that a little bit for me. You said 2 things that I wanted to follow up. Was it EDS?
EDR.
What's
detection and response. So it's kind of the natural progression and evolution of endpoint protection of traditional antivirus, if you will. Okay. It moves beyond just simply detecting or preventing. It's kind of wrapping all of it. And we're in EDR 2.0 essentially now. It's more machine learning, more predictive, more automation built into it. So it's just helping keep up with these threats in more real time as opposed to being reactive all of the time.
And talk about zero trust. What does that mean?
Yeah.
Practically, what does that mean?
Well, zero trust means normally when you set up a VPN connection or network connection now, it's assumed that you have the access necessary. It's assumed you've passed all security checks. That's kind of the method that's used a lot now. But this is a check every single time. I know I just allowed you on the network, but now you're asking for access again. We're going to check you again. We're going to do a posture check. We're going to do an assessment. And that seems cumbersome, but it's all done in real time. It's all done automated in a true zero trust model. And I think because it's more approachable now, that the technology maybe 5 years ago, you could have implemented a zero trust model, but there was a lot of moving pieces. But now as we've gone moving more towards a platform approach, it's all part of one platform. It's much easier to implement it successfully.
And it makes me think of 2-step validation that I often have to go through, right? That text you get to your mobile phone. I think we're talking about, of course, much more sophisticated, but that's that 2-step approach that I think we're all getting used to, right? That extra bit of validation, right?
I think part of it is knowing that it has to be part of our process. Multi-factor authentication is definitely a good step in additional validation, but this is, segmenting the network. You only need access to this portion of this network or this application only, and not just granting carte blanche across the entire network. I think that's kind of what moving to zero trust is. And then the stop, I think, is stop equating compliance to security.
Interesting.
While achieving compliance is sets a good foundation overall cybersecurity and risk management. It is table stakes. It's the cost of doing business. And I think organizations need to move beyond that, move beyond simply being compliant to protect customers' business and the brand, because all of these organizations have to get compliance, but rarely do they maintain compliance throughout the year. And so I think we need to move beyond compliance to more true cyber maturity.
That's an interesting one because, the compliance regimes are pretty sophisticated and pretty, I think of credit card compliance regimes, but you're saying that should just be your starting point. Just make sure that that's where you start, not where you finish the process.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. I mean, it's getting better. And PCI 4.0 is, ratified coming out in the next 18 months. It should start going into practice. And it's putting a focus on security as a continuous process, which I think is great. But again, a lot of these are, compliance. A lot of organizations gain it so they don't get fines or something else. And that should not be our impetus to be more secure.
Right on. All right, well, listen, you a lot of information that you conveyed on us. It's been a great interview, fantastic. I think we've probably just scratched the surface, but it's a great overview. Where can folks go to learn more and get in touch and just start exploring all the great topics you're doing and how to get in touch with, particularly for my Canadian listeners, but also for everyone else who might be listening around the world?
Yeah, so Fortinet.com is obviously the one-stop shop for everything that Fortinet has to offer, which there's a lot of it. And then Fortinet.com/retail for our solutions and guidance tailored specifically towards the retail vertical.
All right. Well, Courtney, that's been great. Thanks so much for coming on, sharing some of this stuff with us. I know many of us hear about it. Some of us, and no doubt of my listeners, are deep into it, but you provided a great overview and brought us all up to date. So thanks so much for joining me on the Voice of Retail podcast.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
Thanks for tuning in to today's episode of The Voice of Retail. Be sure and follow the podcast on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you enjoy podcasts so you don't miss out on the latest episodes, industry news, and insights. If you enjoyed this episode, please consider leaving a rating review, as it really helps us grow so that we continue to get amazing guests onto the show. I'm your host, Michael LeBlanc, president of Emmy LeBlanc Company, Inc., and if you're looking for more content or want to chat, follow me on LinkedIn or visit my website at emmyleblanc.co. Until next time, stay safe, have a great week.